Okay, so welcome and introduction. Thank you everyone for joining. For those that have never met me before, somebody else is sharing now, Taryn, Lynette Andrews, by the looks of it. So introductions, my name is Guy Jelly. I'm the CEO of PPO. I'm joined today by Taryn, who will take us through the presentation and guide us through the session today. And our key guest note speaker, Fiona, is also on the call, but I'll introduce her a little bit later. Fiona, thanks for the time and effort and for sharing your journey with us today. And then there's a bunch of other PPO resources on the call, which will help me during the session, but anyone that you've worked with on the support desk or the DevOps team or even sales or the consulting team, they're all available. They're all on the call today. We did have a comrades runner, so I don't know if he's joined us for today. I know he's on leave this week. But if he is here, Mahadi, well done on your comrades. But yeah, thanks for everyone for joining. Agenda for today, we're going to be covering the multiple resources. Some of you that meet regularly with your success managers would have heard about this for a while. I was actually on a call with a client this morning who said, haven't we spoken about this? I said, yes, we've been speaking about this for a while now. So the multiple resources we're going to cover today, and Tane will do most of it there. Then we're going to do a client spotlight with Fiona, who works for Certa, an Irish-based organization, energy company, talking about the PPO document approvals that they've recently implemented. Then we're going to cover two other features that we've deployed in the last quarter, the line chart, which is a brand new widget and how that works, and then a whole stack of improvements we've made to the scheduler, which has been with most of you for 6-7 months now. We're getting very good traction and feedback on that for those of you that haven't played with the scheduler yet or considered moving to the scheduler. And we've rolled out a whole range of improvements on that, which we'll cover. Questions and answers at the end, and then the next product webinar. So that's really our agenda today. There are some new clients who are joining us today for the first time. Thank you for those, and for some that are signing up for the PPO. So we've had some good new organizations join us recently. There's just 4 of them. I did recognize Stefani's voice previously, so I know she's on the call from Momentum Health Solutions. We've got Foscor that's joined us in the last quarter, African Tikkun, who do some very good work in the NGO space, and then NSSF. These are not all of them, so if you are joining us from a new client this quarter and you're not here, we haven't forgotten about you. We don't care about you. We just try and cover 4 clients every quarter. So your name will definitely be up on the next set as well. Very briefly, quickly, into our last quarter. So you all follow the blog, I hope, or presume. If not, I will post the blog link just now in the chat. We don't use that to sell you anything. We don't do training or certification or sell you extra PPO licenses on Black Friday or anything like that. We literally just send a newsletter every Thursday morning, and the main article in that newsletter is either a client spotlight showing you where somebody has done something great with PPO, or in most cases, a product enhancement. Most of you have been PPO clients for a while. We deploy to PPO on a daily basis. We release a new feature or an upgraded feature almost weekly. Some are very, very small and non-consequential, and others, like you'll see today, are large changes which, require you to take some action and modify your configuration. This is a list of all the features we've released in the last quarter, so they're all there. And those ones will be covered as part of today's session as well. If you don't subscribe to the blog, please do that as well, because that's your best mechanism to see these releases and to see what's coming up. Okay, and we'll cover these every quarter going forward. For those that haven't attended these, next quarter we'll have another webinar and we'll cover those from previous as well. Welcome back, Lindy. I see she's on the chat here. Okay. Taryn, you're going to take us away.
Yes, I was waiting for you to confirm. Okay, so we'll kick off with multiple resources assigned to an item. I'm going to use one of my demo projects here to talk you through it, but a little bit of background around multiple resources assigned to an item. About a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year, we introduced multiple custom list values. So in the past, you had a single selection on your things like your portfolio. These kinds of things would have been a single selection, and we introduced the ability to select multiple. Maybe you've got some form of a strategic pillar and a project is aligned to more than one in a list, and you wanted to be able to select multiple. Multiple resources assigned to an item is exactly the same as that, where you now have the ability to assign more than one person to a task, to a risk as a project owner, even introduce additional fields to reference the project team with multiple people selected in a field. Talking about introducing this, much like every other feature in PPO, the administrators will have to consider the type of environment they have. And while the field will be available to you, you will need to go and look at your instance and decide where it makes the most sense for you to implement. That's true for a lot of the capabilities in PPO. We release enhancements, but administrators need to take action and make a decision on whether you're going to apply it. In the past, this was something that wasn't introduced, and for one reason, and that was to be clear on where accountability sits. And this is something that was requested for a long while, and we were hesitant to introduce it because if you think about an action or an issue, if you have more than one person as the action owner or the issue owner, who do you ultimately hold accountable for that item? So something like a project sponsor, you may want to give careful consideration to whether this becomes a multiple select field, because traditionally a project should only ever have one sponsor. Same with the project manager. A project should only ever have one project manager. But for a project owner, this is an example of where I have implemented a multiple selection on this field, and I can now introduce an additional project owner. You might want to consider your project entity. I'm sure all of you after this call will go look at it, and you might have instances where you've introduced something like analyst one, analyst two, sponsor one, or sponsor two for the purpose of things like approvals. So think about this under your stakeholders on your instance, where would make sense to introduce a multiple selection. You might have fields that say change manager, project administrator, business analyst, individual fields where you select multiple people because these people represent the team. You could adopt something like this, where you have a single field for project team, and you would then make the selection of all of the resources that form part of the project team. So this is an example of one use case for multiple resources assigned to an item. After you've made the submission and saved the information, project owner, we can now clearly see two people. The use of your avatars is beneficial for those of you who have not updated your avatar on your instance. These are the icons that appear in your project status reports and dashboards on your list pages. So it does create some visual elements on your reporting, and as opposed to seeing initials here in your avatar, you would actually see the image and people will know who you are. So if you haven't yet done that, consider doing that. And here you can see the full project team referenced in a field. So that's one use case. The next use case, which I want to quickly touch on, is risks. So here's an example of a risk, and there's two people assigned to a risk. If I were to edit this risk that I've got here, click on edit, you can see the risk owner I've changed to a multiple selection, and I can now assign an additional, as many people as you want, to this to reference a risk owner. So you've got multiple risk owners assigned to this. There may be some opportunity, and we'll talk a little bit about how else you can use this when we talk about work items. But here you can see these risk owners would then use the conversations, a feature that's also been around for about 2 years now, where these three risk owners would be giving feedback on the risk that's assigned to them via the conversation. This is also very useful for when you're following items or assigning items to a list, or you're building a homepage dashboard view all of these resources assigned to this item would now have these items where they are multiple assigned to appearing on their dashboard views for the number of items assigned to them, or my risks or my tasks, you would see that there. So that's another use case for the multiple resources assigned to an item. The same concept, so let me just collapse this so I don't make you seasick. The same, so we've done it on risks. You see what that looks like in a list. The same would apply to a risk dashboard. You would see multiple people assigned to an item. And so just want to quickly, same concept on issues. And I'll show you another example which you may not have considered for something like decisions. So if you're thinking about logging decisions in PPO, projects generate decisions weekly, daily, depending on the nature of your project. And often a decision responsibility rests with more than just a single person. So yeah, you could say this decision responsibility is the owner, the sponsor, potentially the technical lead, whoever that might be, and you can select multiple people as the decision responsibility. Submitting the item, you would then see these 3 people had the responsibility of making this decision related to travel arrangements. So that's another use case. I see a hand up there, Guy.
Vivek, we're not going to take any questions just yet. I think post any questions you might have in the chat. Let's let Taryn go through the session. We've got a question and answer section at the end, and anything that wasn't discussed then, we'll pop it up.
Okay, thank you. So a place where you'll probably see the biggest impact would be on resource allocations and on tasks, specifically your scheduler, whether you're building your schedule directly in PPO via the scheduler, or you're making use of any of the import options, importing a task import sheet, or your MSP schedule. So let's consider this project that we're working on here. We've got these resources that are assigned to this project, all 3 of them up until the end of September. You can also see their percentage allocation from the 21st of May. Now let's say this project is going to take a pause from the 16th till the end of the month, and they're going to start up again on the 30th or the first month, or 1st of October. What we can now do is we can select the resources, multiple resources, adjust their percentage allocation. So let's say it's 20%, 10%. So remember, when you're dealing with your allocation, this indicates how much of this resource's working time has been committed for this in a particular period. So if I were to say 1 October to in November, so over the 2-month period, these 3 resources have been added at 20%, 10%, 10% of their allocation, or 10% of their available time for this period. If I was to submit, I have a single record with all 3 resources, each with different percentage allocations for the period of 43 days. The planned hours is the sum of the time for each of the resources based on the allocation that's been specified. So that's probably one of the most noticeable changes on resource allocation. Is you could, for the duration of your project, have a single record with all of the resources, but that would of course be that they in the same period, and you can adjust their allocations. You would then have multiple records if the start and end dates differ per resource. So if I went back to my project, you can see we'll have two resource records. Scrolling back down to it, 2 resource records here, one for each of them for the period 21 May to 16 September, and a single record with all 3 against it from the 1st of October till the end of November. So that's something that you can do. with your multiple resources assigned to an item on resource allocations. Remember, resource allocations in PPO, your planning can be determined from your resource allocation entity or from your schedule. In the past, if we jump to the schedule, in the past, you would have in PPO, using our scheduler, you would always be limited to having a single resource against a task. That proved to be problematic when you had multiple people on the same task, but it would have meant that in PPO, for the purpose of PPO and resource capacity planning, if you were doing it off your schedule, you'd have to have the same task duplicated 3 or 4 times, depending on the number of people assigned to an item. With this new capability, that's no longer a requirement. You can, on your schedule, via the scheduler, add multiple people. So I could go Barry, Evelyn, and adjust their percentage allocation. So let's say that's 45% and Evelyn is 10%. So this is how much of their working time I'm committing to the task. So 10% of Evelyn's working time, 45% of Barry's time, and that changes it. So there you can see if I were to submit, I now have the ability to assign multiple resources to a task, and the same would work if I was doing it via an import, via a schedule. To demonstrate that, I'm going to quickly show it to you as well. So I have a project here. I'm going to use this for demonstration purposes. If I click on my list, I've got no schedule in this today. If I were to click on import, I'm going to browse for my Microsoft project plan. Let me quickly just open my plan for you so that you see that I have multiple resources assigned to a task. Here's my project plan template. In my template, I've got Evelyn, Mary assigned to this, and each of them have an allocation of 20%. So there it is. The first 2 tasks, multiple resources assigned to an item. My last task is just a single resource. So you've seen my schedule. If I browse for my schedule, imported, and submit, your summary page tells me I've got 4 tasks. I'm going to import 4 tasks. And viewing that, you can now see 3 people assigned to task 1, task 2, single person assigned there. So exactly the same would apply if you're importing. In the past, what it would have done, it would have taken the name of the first resource assigned to the task. And if you wanted these 2 people referenced on your task, you would have had to duplicate the task for each of them. If I go to my scheduler view, you'll now see same thing visible as I had done on the previous project. So regardless of whether you're importing via MSP, your task import sheet, using your scheduler, adding tasks directly in PPO, you can now assign multiple resources to a task, which now also makes it easier if ever you wanted to switch to generating your planning from your planning dashboards off of your schedule opposed to your resource allocations. So that's now something that's a lot easier to do, but you of course have to consider that you would do planning a lot earlier than you would when you're using your resource allocations entity for planning. Okay, so that covers some of the most common use cases for multiple resources assigned to an item. I'm just going to recap. You could potentially use it on, let me use my Northern Frontier Marketing project. So places where you could use it is on your project entity when you're referencing a project team and you want to show all of the resources involved in the project, where you have multiple project owners, which can be common, where you potentially have multiple fields like change manager, administrator, business analyst, or system analyst 1, 2. You could consider replacing those and having a single field like I've done here. You could have it on risks, on issues, decisions for decision responsibility, resource allocations, where you assign multiple resources on an allocation record for the same period, but different percentage allocations on tasks. And finally, for those of you who are using work items and sprints for agile delivery or hybrid work, you could potentially use that on your work items as well. So I'll show you a quick example. This is something that we at PPO do, is where we have our responsibility field. So this Barry Atkins is ultimately responsible for this work item, but we introduced an assign to where we have people that are involved in the completion of this work item introduced as a separate field, and we show the assign to people that are contributing in some or other way. So we've introduced a second field, we've specified it as a multiple selection, allowing you to still keep the responsibility at that level and having multiple people assigned to the item. From a sprint dashboard point of view, the output of that, I'll quickly show it to you. On your Kanban, you'll see for a sprint that is in progress. Looking at the sprint dashboard, we can see there is our work items, the responsible person, and the assigned to referenced on the sprint dashboard. So hopefully you will take some time to review your instance as you've seen how this works in action. Consider where you would find the most value from it, and with the help of your success manager, because in some cases, if you're changing your fields from a single selection to a multiple selection, your existing data will be fine. In other cases, if you're completely changing the type of field you have, you may want to get some guidance from your success manager, who would offer you best practice advice on how to make the switch without impacting existing data. This change is in the process of being deployed. We've got a couple of actions to complete on our end regarding updating of documentation, making available to you updated templates for resource import sheets, things like that. So you can expect this to be available on your instance by the 25th of June, and that would be the week after next. So again, if you've got any questions, if you're not sure where it makes the most sense to apply it in your environment, chat to your success manager. They'll be more than happy to help you. And that's it. Questions? Or you're happy to go to Fiona Guy?
Yeah, I think let's keep moving. There have been some questions. I've answered all of them so far. Just a reminder to everyone, we are recording this. So those that attend, we share a thank you for attending video, and we share the recording. And it's also will be in our blog post next week for those that get the newsletter as well. Please share that out with your colleagues that couldn't attend. And just a reminder to everybody, there is these sessions are open to anyone, so it doesn't have to be a PPO administrator or a PPO owner or system owner. We have a number of clients who bring their project managers and those to these sessions as well. So please do that as well. Okay, Fiona is the PMO lead for CERTA. She's been there for just over a year, I believe. And CERTA has had a PMO for about 18 months, maybe 2 years now. Fiona came in at the end of the implementation. So CERTA selected PPO out of a number of tools they looked at. And we did the implementation with a consulting organization that CERTA had contracted at the time to help build a PMO and build some sustainable processes and look at some technology. And then Fiona joined as part of that project that they were running to uplift and create and establish a PMO as the PMO lead. So subsequent to joining, she's taken them up a number of notches in terms of maturity. And one of the key things that they embedded in the last couple of months has been document approvals. I don't want to introduce or say too much because then we're going to talk in behalf of Fiona. But Fiona, thank you very much for joining us. Fiona joins us from Dublin as well. So for you South Africans, you're going to have to listen a little bit closer with that accent of hers. But Fiona, thank you for joining us. from Dublin and for joining us today. I'm going to hand over to you. If there are any questions for Fiona specifically, post them. I'm sure she will address them afterwards. And Fiona is a very um, available and open person, so I'm sure she wouldn't mind taking a question or two via email afterwards as well. But I think, Fiona, firstly, thanks for joining us. Congrats on your journey so far with CERTA. Um, and yeah, please share with us the knowledge you've had, and we'll answer any questions on the side.
Okay, and if I speak too quickly with my very Dublin, very Irish accent, feel free to slow me down. So as
It's
Guy
normally it's
mentioned,
it's normally us South Africans that have these horrible weird accents. I know it's a refreshing change.
I've adapted to your accent now, I think. So as Guy mentioned, yes, our organisation, we're a leading energy company in Ireland, and it was actually a number of businesses that came together into one. So the need was identified to put in a PMO and to select a tool to support with that. So I came in at the latter end of that and launched the PMO just over 18 months ago. It's been a journey, as Guy mentioned. Uh, we don't have project managers or project professionals within the business as part of their role. So what we've done is, because we manage a large volume of change at pace, we've worked it into our business users' way of working. So our project managers essentially are using the project framework and the PPO tool as the way of working. And that allows us to put a formalized governance framework in place. And it's allowed us to do much more along that journey. So today, in terms of the automated documents approvals process, I will share a dashboard, but I'll just give the background of where we're at, and then I'll talk you through it. So the governance types that we create, and we create our governance documents predominantly within the PPO tool. What we noted and what I identified as the PMO lead was that we had a multitude of documents, but we didn't have tracking and traceability around them. And they were created using multiple tools. So we would have had Word documents, Excel documents, a multitude of documents. So version control, traceability, approvals, levels within those documents was very hard to control. And it led to, very cumbersome and very manual work. So I had a vision for how we could potentially resolve that, but I very much leaned on the PPO team to help me to bring that vision to light. So what we did, we've created a standard within the business that for our governance control documents, so for example, business case charters, change impact assessment, comms plans, CapEx approval requests, all of those are created within the PPO tool. So once that came into play and we created a standard for the documents, that was fine. However, the gap then led us to the approvers and the trail of approvals as we went through the system. So trying to keep track of what documents were approved at what phases and stages within a project was very difficult, because at that time we had a portfolio of over 80 projects. So as you can imagine, it was quite a juggling act to keep track of that. We were at risk of loss of documents, and we were losing time rapidly. So we implemented the documents approval process. So what happens is, once we create the documents within PPO, they're submitted for approval, and the approvals mechanisms that we have in place. So essentially, depending on the document type, will depend on where the documents are approved. So all documents submitted are first line approved by the sponsors. So the PM will submit a document using the system that will automatically be issued to the approver's homepage. They'll have sight of it. So as I say, the first line approver is the sponsor. The sponsor will then either approve or decline the document, hopefully approve it. and then it will move to the next level. So for example, a CapEx request will go through to the sponsor, but it will then go to head of finance for second level approval. A business case will be approved by the sponsor. It's then automatically goes to the second level, which is the finance department. They would analyse and approve it, and it would then ultimately go to our head of business for overall sign off for the business case and the project to proceed. So by utilising this process, we're now confident that, number one, all of our documents are centrally located. We've eliminated the risk of lost documents. They're easily accessible. We've improved our turnaround times in terms of getting the approvals in place. And we also have, as you can see by the dashboard, and we'll talk through that, full visibility of the approvals process. So the dashboard shows, as you can see here, we've got across the board well over 900 documents have gone through the system already through this approvals process. We can see the approvals per approver. So for those, the status, the approver, and the volume of documents going to each of those approvers. We can also then see the number of days that they're awaiting approval. So depending on the project type and the complexity, obviously we'd allow for some days to be short and some to be long. But moving down further, what we can see also is the average days that it would take to approve or decline documents per approver. Now, what that does for me specifically as the PMO lead is it allows me to focus in on areas that might require support. So if I see that there are longer lead times on getting documents approved, I can provide direct support to the project teams, sponsors, and or approvers to see what the challenges and blockers may be. That, in addition to the automated approvals process, allows us to expedite our delivery more quickly. So the setup, I think, was the longest part in terms of the approvals process, and the setup was on our side as a business. We had to be very clear on what our wants and needs were, what our vision was, and what the ultimate solution for us as a business would be. However, once we clarified and relayed those asks and needs to the business, we were then able to work with PPO and get this set up and in place very quickly. So in addition to me having oversight utilising this dashboard, we've also put in place a documents approval tracking report. This is sent via the PPO system through an auto mailer. So it's emailed to the relevant approvers on a weekly basis on a Monday. So although it lands on their homepage within PPO, it also issues that 7-day reminder to say that documents are ready to be approved. You'll see here we've got some declined documents. If they're declined, they need to be refined by the project manager. They'll get notified. And once they resubmit, the automated approvals process kicks in again. We've also got pending documents, so we can see where documents essentially are in draft state, but they haven't yet been submitted. And just, I don't know how we're doing for time, but just in terms of the actual approvals traceability within our system. So one of our projects here is a CRM implementation. So you can see from here, we built out the business case in the tool. We then submitted the business case through the approvals mechanism. And for our business case, we have a 3-level stage approval system. So the document was submitted to our first line approver, who's the sponsor. It then went through to our finance department. They then approved it, and it automatically then went to our managing director, head of business, as the third and final line of approval. So we have 1, 2, and 3 levels of approvals, as I mentioned, depending on the governance controls and requirements that we need for specific documents within our business. So as I said, from our side, it was very much doing our due diligence, being very clear around what our asks and wants and needs were, and then relaying that to PPO. But once we had relayed that and worked with PPO, within a matter of weeks, we had our automation approval process in place. And we developed and built upon that as needs arose. So we knew initially we needed it for a business case, and then thought, okay, for communication, it's key. We need to put that through this system as well. CapEx approval, absolutely. So then we added that. So we've developed and built upon it over time. And as we identify the needs within our business and the level of controls that we'd like to apply, we've been able to adapt those and introduce them through this approvals mechanism within the system. So I think that's overall what we've done and how we've done it. And Guy and Taryn, I'm not sure if there are any areas that you'd like to kind of hone in on in terms of what we've done.
Yeah, and I think you've done a great job. David, we'll take some questions at the end. You can pop it in the chat now. I just want to make sure we cover all the other stuff, but we definitely will allow some time at the end. I think one of the impacts that I saw working with Fiona and the PMO is by doing the document approvals on PPO and the document approvals being at such a senior level within the CERTA business, it actually got the CERTA executive and management team closer to the PMO and the portfolio reporting and all the rest. So a byproduct of getting them engaged in the process and the technology was actually more questions coming out around the portfolio health and those type of things. So where I think a lot of PMO managers battled to get the executives engaged, Fiona, by doing this, actually found a different way to get more engagement, which I think was a byproduct neither of us expected as part of this journey. So we'll keep moving on, and if there are questions, please post them. We're trying to address as many of them in the comments as possible. Just remember, the online approvals is an existing feature in PPO that all of you as PPO clients have. It just needs to be activated and pointed to either timesheets or scope changes or project gates, or in this case, what we've covered, documentation. So it's not something new. It's not a module or a feature you need to pay for. It's really just activating it. And most of it is fairly generic in terms of the setup, so it can happen fairly quickly. I think Fiona mentioned that the change management that happens within your environment is going to take you significantly longer than us to actually switch it on. So I think that's important. Fiona mentioned it, and I'm not sure if all the people on the call understood exactly what she said. Some clients have templates that they use in the project management process, which is a Word charter and a Word closure report and a Microsoft project plan template. Fiona and the team at CERTA adopted to use the PPO reports. So they produce a charter or a business case or a closure report directly out of PPO by running one of those standard PPO reports, and that information obviously gets pulled out of PPO. Project name, description, objectives, benefits, timelines, costs, all those type of things. So forcing the behavior of getting all the data into PPO, and the report or the output that needs to be produced is just a byproduct. So one way of doing it. Some clients do it for charters and closures, but not business cases because they're complex documents with financial models. But that is an option as well for those that don't know it, and I've posted a link to that. Charters, closure reports, PMPs, project deliverable sign-offs, they're all standard reports in PPO already that all of you have. They may need a little bit of tailoring for your needs or purposes, but they're already there in the system for you to use as well.
Yeah, and sorry, Guy,
Okay.
just to mention on that piece, by us using that document creation within PPO, it allowed us to create a standard right across the business, and that was something that we were very heavily striving towards.
Yep. Okay. Taryn, you want to carry on? Taryn's posted the poll there, but I'm going to hand over and we can carry on. I'm going to answer. There's a bunch of questions racking up here now. I'm just going to answer them now. Taryn, you're on mute.
Thank you, Guy.
2025, you've been doing this for 5 years now.
Sorry. So Every webinar has a client spotlight for 10, 15 minutes, max 15 minutes, and we use existing capabilities, and we ask on our clients to maybe share something good that they've done. If there's any specific capability, functionality that you'd love for us to feature in the next webinar client spotlights, let us know. Pop it in on the poll so we know exactly what it is that you guys are wanting to see around capabilities that have worked well in other client environments. So I'd encourage you to share that. Okay, demand and capacity management. If any of you want to vote on that one, you definitely can. If you've got others that you want to post, let us know. And somebody has stolen share from me. Okay, please feel free, drop it in the chat as well if you don't get to respond in the poll. We'll use that information to plan for our next webinar. The next webinar is in September, but we'll share the information for that webinar towards the end. A reminder, please follow the blog. I believe Guy has posted the link in the chat. If you want to stay up to date on any new features, like when multiple resources assigned to an item is made available to all clients, it will be communicated in that week in the Thursday newsletter. So make sure you are signed up to get notification on that. Okay, so the next feature that I want to cover is the line chart widgets. So the line chart widget joins our existing library of widgets. So you can see this is a homepage dashboard, which is aimed at a PPO administrator. And I'm quickly going to edit my dashboard and show you exactly what the line chart widget looks like and for what purpose you can use it. So here, if I click on Add Widget to my widget library, you will see the list of widgets will pop up. You're familiar with the bar chart, the board, the calendar. All of these are examples of existing widgets, and you see the line charts as an addition. So the line chart makes a good use case for this is on your cost data. So if you consider your costs, you typically want to generate an S-curve. While this S-curve dashboard is a standard output available in PPO, you could also use one of the widgets, like the line chart widget, to replicate the cost S-curve dashboard. So what I've done is selected the widget, select the source of my data, which is costs. I've added the widget. It's gone to the bottom. I want it now next to my portfolio Gantt view. And same like all other widgets, you would typically need to configure your widget settings. So if I were to click on my widget settings, the interval type would be daily, monthly, quarterly. While we're on monthly, I would like to mention that for some of the client instances, you may not have a year and month field implemented on your instance. We've identified who those clients are. There's work being done in the background to introduce a calculated year-month field on your behalf, and you will be contacted individually once that change has been implemented for you. For most of our clients, you would have this year-month calculated field, so using this widget shouldn't be a challenge. For the case of a S-curve, the operator would make sense for me to use a sum because I want to see the sum of my budget, my actual spend. So there's my spend and potentially my total at completion. So that is the operator being the sum. The measures is the fields I want to sum up. The mode would either be normal or cumulative for costs on an S-curve. Cumulative makes the most sense. Your palette would either be the generic palette that comes with PPO or your skin color, which would be your CI, your whatever your corporate identity colors are. I'll apply the generic palette, and there you would see an S-curve of my cost data, budget, spend, total at completion being the orange bar. You would also have the ability to apply any of the filters on your cost entity. You can filter for a particular set of projects, maybe just my projects or active non-admin projects or whatever project filters you have, a single project or more than one project, if you haven't applied the global filters or share filters, and you can do that. And there's your S-curve. If I were to save my dashboard, that's now available as a permanent widget on my homepage view. The widget is available on any of your list pages as well. So I could go to a cost list, and on my list here, just to take away that filter, you will have the ability to add the line chart widget. Key metric is there, donut, tree map, bar, and the addition is the line chart widget as well. So you can use it on a list page in addition to on your home page. The one thing that I would just mention is cost is not the only place where you could use it. Benefits is another example where it would make sense to use it. If you're using benefit management in PPO, doing things like cumulative planned values and cumulative actual values on your benefits, a line chart would be useful to see that kind of information. Finally, the next item on the agenda is the scheduler improvements. There's a couple of those. I think there's a total of 4 of them. So I'm going to do my best to get through these quite quickly. Let me just shut some of these down. So the first thing that I want to mention is the calculated planned progress on the task level. At our last webinar, we mentioned that it was coming, and not long after the webinar in March, calculated planned progress was available on task level. Historically, it was always calculated at the overall project level, which you saw on your project entity. But now, in addition to that, you will see it in your scheduler calculating real time, like this one as an example. The 11th of June is the planned start date. When I checked this morning, it was sitting at 13%. So as the time ticks through the day, the planned progress calculates real time. That's been released and available for the last couple months now. So just for all of you who have not yet seen it, it's here in your scheduler view as well as on a task list. So the same thing you see in your scheduler is now available, real-time calculation on your task list. The column is not there, but if I were to quickly introduce it, you will see that that same 20% that you saw in the scheduler view is now available in the task view. The next change that came was the ability to show in a task list what your predecessors and successors are for a particular task. That was not always something that you would see on a task list, but with the scheduler, it made sense for us to align the two as closely as possible. So on a task view, as well as on a task list, you can see what is my predecessor task and what are my succeeding tasks. So there's the successor task. So I can see the ID of those tasks, and that's now available to me on a list page. Going back to my list, I just want to make sure I've covered these on the list. Yes, we've got it. The next thing I'm going to jump to is our Gantt chart. So on the Gantt chart, we made a couple of improvements with the introduction of the scheduler. The Gantt widget also got a bit of an update, and with that, there were some enhancements identified by the users themselves that have been using both the scheduler and the Gantt widget. And I'm first going to talk about one with column wrapping. So previously, you didn't have the ability to adjust your columns and have the field or the heading column header wrapping the way you see it wrapping now. So on my actual progress percentage, you can see that the column heading now wraps. That's the first change. And the next one is probably one of the most requested enhancements related to the scheduler as well as the Gantt widget, is the ability to adjust or color code your bars, being these summary tasks, milestones. And I first want to quickly show you from an administration point of view where this comes from. For administrators, you all have your widget configuration where you set the defaults for your widgets, and it's no different for the Gantt widget. So the addition would be on the Gantt widget, under your widget configuration, you've got the ability to set the appearance of your bars for the Gantt widget. Your options would be fixed. First would be this, so these would be fixed colors, black for a milestone, blue for detailed tasks, this green color for summary, and this would be your project task. This would be the default applied to the Gantt widget for all users. That's determined under your widget configuration. So if the admins decide that it's not going to be fixed and they're going to actually make this based on a field like status, you will notice that then, like I've got here, my colors are based on the status of the task. So when the task is doing, my bar is amber. When it's overdue, it's red. When it's still to do, it shows it as green. If I were to go back to my settings, and this here is where I apply my preferences, I could quite easily change it back to fixed. If I were to save this, you can see on my Gantt widget, the color coding of my bars and milestones aligns to what's set as the default. Again, if a user wants to change the default colors and you want your milestone to not be black and you want it to be any other color, maybe some form of a purple celebration, you can change that, apply it, and you would see your milestone colors change. That's a user preference where they can adjust their colors as and how. I can take this back to black, save it, and this would be a user's preference. So color coding bars and milestones is now possible. You have two options, applying the fixed, which is very close to what you see on Microsoft Project, or you could use any of your fields that exist in PPO already. Something like status is color coded as you saw it, and that would be one option that would make sense. Going back to fixed, I can save that again. And I think that is all the scheduler improvements I wanted to cover. Task level plan progress. Oh, final one. On the Gantt widget, previously, if you looked at your Gantt widget and you don't have a single project filter applied, you will notice that you don't see any dependency arrows. And the reason for that is because you're looking at all the projects and not a specific project. What we've allowed for when you're on the Gantt widgets and you've selected a single project to still see the dependency arrows, which we've now brought back. So where there are dependent tasks, you see the dependency arrows when a single project is selected. You won't see it when it's all projects, but you now will see it when a single project has been selected. And I think that is it for all the scheduler enhancements.
Karen, there's a question on the name of the task name there. Can you just demonstrate that you can extend those columns yourself?
Oh, I didn't see it, sorry. There we go. You can do that.
Answered the question, but I think it just was useful to do that.
Yeah, and you can do the same on the scheduler as well. So if you wanted to adjust your column width on the scheduler and on the Gantt widget, you can do the same. And I think that is it for all the new features that we were meant to cover. We've got a couple minutes left, 3 minutes. I think we can take questions now. And of course, if we could get some feedback on the value of today's session.
You're more than welcome to take off your microphone and ask the questions. We'll try and answer them. Otherwise, those that are posting questions in the chat, we will do those as well. Taryn, there was a question from Victor asking, can you add tasks in the scheduler from the middle of the schedule as opposed to the end? Victor, the answer is yes. Taryn can demonstrate it quickly. There's a whole bunch of fields on that scheduler. So if you just scroll to the right, you'll see there's some additional ones. So if you wanted to add one there, that's how you would do it. Find it on the schedule, click on the add button. It'll pop it into that schedule. and off you go. So you don't have to do it at the bottom and drag it up. You can do it there.
Sorry, I thought this would be an easier question to ask than to type.
No problem.
Is there an ability to allow people that sort of update project plans that are not on PPO, or somebody that I do not want them to access the PPO system itself and go through all the projects, etc. We've got a lot of contractors, obviously, that help us update our project plans. And the main reason we still keep Microsoft Project instead of using the scheduler is because these guys have to update our project plans where we can't. Is there a way that we could sort of lock those guys out of everything else and only give them a link to that scheduler where they could then go and maintain that scheduler only, and they do not have access to any other feature on the system or PPO? So in other words, I give James Bond a link and I say to him, he can go and update project XYZ scheduler only. He cannot view tasks, he cannot view risks, cannot go into any reporting functionality, etc. Is that something we could sort of have a look at going forward?
Yeah. Denise, you made a comment when you started to say, I don't want them on PPO, and I was going to say, that's the worst decision you've ever taken. So you want them on PPO, you just don't want them to see everything. The answer to your question is yes.
I don't want them to see anything else on our projects, etc. I literally want them to come onto the scheduler, click on the link, update what they need to do, and get out of there, if that makes sense what I'm saying.
I don't know if Annalise from MediClinic is on the call, or somebody from NetProp or Department of Health. Most infrastructure, most CapEx clients, capital PMO clients have exactly your requirement, and most of them actually do it. So what you can do, Denise, is you can have a limited user group access to say, I only want you to see, view and edit the schedule. Yep. And you can only do it where you're a team member on the project, and that's your access. When you log into PPA, you're literally going to have 3 buttons and 2 screens, and they just do that.
Okay, perfect. I'll get hold of Jan and get him to give me some training on that.
Yeah.
And
Jan actually asked me the other day, he said to me the other day that you've got a bunch of users you want to add on that are peripheral users, and what's the easiest way to do it. I actually gave him some recommendations on that. So yeah,
I'll definitely give him a shot and we'll do some training on that. Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, that's easily doable and standard functionality.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for those of you giving us some nice comments there. I know some of you are jumping off to other sessions, so please feel free to do that. Thanks for the score there as well. That's also looking very good. Taryn, do you just want to cover the next webinar quickly?
Okay. These, when we share the PDF with you guys, you will see links to any of the all of the features that we've covered in today's session. Our next webinar is on the 17th of September for you to save your seats. We'll also share it in the thank you email. If you've not yet registered, you can save your seat now already. It's available for you to book and add it to your calendar. And that's it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
We're going to stick around and answer any other questions.